All right, everyone. It is the top of the hour. Want to welcome you to our storytelling webinar, How Scripps Supports Powerful Storytelling. I'm going to turn it over now to Chris Nagus, who is our Senior Director of Storytelling and Content Strategy. Take it away, Chris.
All right, Neil, I appreciate it. And thank you to everybody that is gathered here today. We know that your time is valuable, so we hope to make the most of it. This is a great opportunity to better understand what Scripps is about and perhaps what we're not about. We put together a panel today that I am particularly proud of. They are all strong reporters, and all of them come from very different backgrounds, and they've gotten into this career for really the same reason, to tell good stories. But we'll talk more about the individuals that we've assembled and their process and their storytelling and how their voices have been elevated in the company over the last couple of years. But when we talk about this panel, how Scripps supports powerful storytelling, I want to just give you a quick background about myself for those of you who don't know me, and then we'll talk about this map that you see in front of you. I was a television reporter for 23, almost 24 years in a number of markets. My most recent position, KMOV Television in St. Louis. I was the investigative reporter for the CBS affiliate a number of years, more than a decade, before transitioning into a corporate role. As a reporter, obviously part of my job was to ask questions, but part of what I did along the way, I always asked, what's next? You know, every newsroom I worked in, there was never really a position called director of reporters or the lead reporter. And we'll talk about how that's evolved over the last couple of years here at Scripps, because not only is this an opportunity to talk about potential jobs as reporters, MMJs, anchors around the country. But what do you grow into next? What is the path? So as you take a look at this map, we have a lot of dots. So almost every corner of the country is covered, 61 television stations in 41 local news markets. We've got markets big and small and everything else in between from coast to coast. In the past almost 3.5 years that I've been in this position, I have visited almost every single one of these dots on the map, and I've gotten to know our anchors, reporters, news directors, managers over the years, and I've built meaningful relationships with many of them, and I'm proud to say I've watched a lot of them grow into the reporters they are today, and seen several of those reporters, including the ones that you're going to meet today, and we'll talk about their journey and their growth. Neil, if you want to go ahead and move to the next slide, I just want to briefly talk about the news initiative here at Scripps and give you some numbers. Over the last couple of years, and really what our goal by the end of 2024 is to add 250 reporters across our local markets. I know that we work in a tough industry, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that. We know that audience erosion is real. We know that there aren't as many people watching the linear product as there were 5-10 years ago. But we've doubled down and we've made the investment in reporting, because we realize, and I'm sure many of you that have worked in small markets have looked around your newsrooms and thought, man, we have 3 or 4 reporters, and if somebody calls in sick, somebody's on PTO, all of a sudden that leaves 1 or 2 reporters to cover, the story of the day and not much else. So even in our smallest markets, our goal is to have approximately a dozen reporters. In many markets, this is going to be double-digit numbers of reporters, double-digit increases. Some of our larger markets, Denver, Detroit, you'll see 27, 28 reporters. And that gives us the luxury of having crews that don't need to turn every single day, reporters that can develop their pieces. We talk about 20 journalists in the newly created role of executive reporter. That number is actually now closer to 30. Neil, I should have updated the slide, but it's closer to 30 at this point. And our goal is to have the executive reporter title in every single one of our newsrooms. You'll meet one of those executive reporters today and talk about his path into that job. We've talked about repurposing the role of anchors in 25 plus markets. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have anchors in many of those markets, but we will have more of an emphasis on seeing anchors in the field. It's not just my belief, but the belief of many on our corporate team, that the best anchors are the best reporters in the newsrooms. We've invested more than $11 million in additional compensation. We're highly competitive as far as market pay in many of our small, mid, and large markets. And as we speak right now, we have a robust infield training program that is underway. We have 4 different waves of this training that are happening across the company. We're getting ready to launch what we're calling Wave 3 internally, and then Wave 4 in December. But that's where we tap some of our best reporters, internal reporters that already work for Scripps, to send them out into the field to help train in our markets. I'm one guy, I'm one person. And when you're talking about a company with 700 reporters, obviously I can't do all of that. So we've tapped some of our internal talent to help with this. And we've partnered with news managers, producers, and reporters to roll out that training. So as we move into our next slide here, I want to talk a little bit about our panel today. Of course, I've introduced myself, but I'd like to start with Geneva, have them say just a couple of words about themselves, and we'll be hearing from them more over the course of the next hour. So Geneva, I'm going to kick it over to you to start the introductions.
Thanks, Chris. My name's Geneva, and I am a weather anchor and reporter, multimedia journalist in Las Vegas. We have beats at our station, and my beat is climate and environment, and it's something I'm really passionate. I went to school for it, about climate reporting specifically, but also just anything that has to do with the environmental world. And I think Scripps is awesome because I actually get to do that. It's kind of a rarity in TV news to get to cover environmental issues, but I get to do it in Las Vegas. So that's a little bit about me.
All right, thank you, Geneva. I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm Adam Klepp. I'm a reporter here at KNXV in Phoenix. I've worked in multiple Scripps markets. I started here with Scripps at K-Gun in Tucson. Worked professionally in Arizona, though. My whole career started off in Yuma. And while I've been in Arizona, I've done a lot of border and immigration stories, which you'll see in a little bit.
All right, thank you, Adam. Bryant in Norfolk.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bryant Madrick, executive reporter at WTKR in Norfolk, Virginia. I have been here at this television station for almost a year. October will be my 1-year anniversary. But before I came to this station, I worked at our station in Kansas City, KSHB, for nearly 4 years, covering a lot of stories, including even the Chiefs Super Bowl, a couple of Super Bowls. And throughout my career as a reporter, which has spanned about 13, 14 years, reported, anchored, produced, operated live trucks. So I come into this new management role with a lot of prior experience. And I'll talk to you a little bit later on about how I'm using that experience to help a lot of our MMJs here at the station.
All right, and Brian, had you stayed in Kansas City, you might be covering a third Super Bowl at the end of this year. Who knows? I don't.
Hopefully not.
Won't go off the rail today. All right, Austin in Nashville.
Hey, everybody. I'm Austin Pollack. I am a multimedia journalist for WTVF News Channel 5 here in Nashville. I've been with Scripps for almost 3.5 years. I started at our sister station, WLAX in Lexington, Kentucky, as a general assignment MMJ, and then worked my way into a little bit more of a focus on positive storytelling in Lexington, and then an opportunity came up here in Nashville where we needed someone to really focus on positive stories, but also really that focus on quality over quantity. So it came from, in Lexington, it was turning 5 stories a week. And here in Nashville, I turn about 2 or 3 a week. But the difference is, they have to be really, really focused and have a little extra TLC that comes with the time that I'm given. So I'll talk a little bit about what Scripps has done for me and what Nashville has done for me, as well as Lexington, and helping me really just come into this dream job that I really love to do every single day.
All right, Austin, thank you so much. And I think one of the themes that you'll hear from this group today is how they've been able to build trust with their news managers. Austin talked about those targeted pitches, but sometimes the pitch may not be as focused, and you'll see some examples of that today and talk about what comes out of that. And it'll make more sense as we move through this webinar here this afternoon. So with that, I just want to briefly touch on this. Through the news initiative at Scripps, we've asked all of our television stations, what do you want to be famous for? What do you want the public to know about you? Because we know that we cannot be everything to everyone. And as a result, we have our markets, many of our smaller stations that have picked neighborhood news. That is just a good old-fashioned geographic-based beat system of reporters covering the market. We talk about voices of the community. Our station, for example, Detroit, is one of those voices stations, and that's truly about elevating the voice, in many cases, of the underdog, going to bat for that person in the community, but making sure that we're also hearing from folks, not just in the urban core, but also in the rural parts of the DMA. What are the voices that we're elevating in our newscast? We're trying to make sure that we're representative of the entire community. Positive stories, as Austin just talked about. I know that many of the reporters on this call, when you're out in the field, because I heard it when I was a reporter in St. Louis, people would say to me, I don't watch the news because it's all negative or bad or depressing. So we want to make sure that we're giving people positive about their communities and the places that they call home. Fight for what's right. That's really an internal mantra, but that's accountability journalism and making sure that we are holding the powerful accountable and trying to get solutions for our viewers. We're not just pointing out problems. We follow through, right? It's a basic tenet of journalism. But one of the things that we hear in our research from our viewers is, hey, we see the stories that you present, but whatever happened to that guy or that gal or that school or that administrator or that person? So we are really making a conscious effort of selecting the right follow-up stories. And those aren't necessarily quick 30-second VO or VOSOT follow-ups. Those are high impact, high quality stories where we stay with a character over time. And anchors reporting, that really is the price of admission at Scripps. Our viewers are asking for that. They want to see our anchors connected to our communities. So with that, I want to show some examples today. And I've asked each one of the reporters, well, before I get to that, let me just make mention of this. About a month and a half ago, we had a webinar talking about neighborhood news specifically. And I know that we have a lot of people that are on this call that might be looking for their first or second job. And when we talk about neighborhood news, this is an example right here from our Tallahassee market where we cover North Florida, South Georgia. And if you go back to about a year and a half, most of our focus was truly on Tallahassee, Leon County, like this immediate core area of the market. But today, we've spread that out. So you see Malia on, well, what's the far right on my screen, who's covering Valdosta, Georgia, which is 90 minutes away from the station. Malia is a former print journalist that's now converted to broadcast. But we have that expertise in that corner of the market that we didn't have before. But as you see all of the different names and the communities they represent, from Bainbridge, Georgia, Collegetown, Florida, Southwest Tallahassee, the Panacea area, Thomasville, Georgia, we are all over the market. And this geographic beat system in these neighborhood news stations has really allowed first and second time reporters to own a bite-sized chunk, is what I call it, or a corner of the market and become unmatched experts in that part of the community. And we've seen a lot of success there. So with that, I want to get into some of our visual examples today and just talk about the variety of stories that we're covering on the air at Scripps. I'm going to start with Adam Klepp in Phoenix. Now, I want to just give a little background here. Again, I visit all of our stations and I get to work with our reporters and our anchors and our MMJs, and oftentimes that includes field work. I was down at Tucson at KGUN TV working with our reporters, and that's when I first met Adam, and he told me about his interest in border issues. He had come from the Yuma, Arizona market. And I said, kind of in passing, man, I'd love to go out on a story with you to the border. I'd love to go down to Nogales with you and see you in your process. And he said, well, do you want to get up at 5 a.m. tomorrow and do that? And I said, okay, I'm in. I'm taking advantage. So Adam and I got in the car and drove down to the border, and I got to see him in the field at what he does best. Now, that's not the story he's going to show today, but Adam has now worked his way up to our Phoenix newsroom. But he's really owned that beat, that border coverage, which is not only of local interest, but really national interest. So Adam, go ahead and set this story up and tell us a little bit about your process. We'll watch the piece and then I'll let you break it down.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. When we went to the border together in Nogales, that was September, October, I think, when you were in Tucson. Again, this is something I covered at a previous station, not within Scripps. So then I just started with the company, kept following up on these stories through the winter as there was a big surge in crossings in December, specifically in Arizona. All of the national networks were there, and I was down there as well doing coverage for Tucson for local TV. And so this is something that over the course of a few months, I built up a trust with my news managers in Tucson that, hey, I know it's, a big lift. We're spending money on the gas and all that stuff. But when I go down to the border, and I'm going to make sure that I come back with strong stories. So this is from March of this year, I went to an area called Sassabee, a little bit removed from where the main crossings were. And this was an area we had gone to before because there's a camp set up by border volunteers. And really all my pitch was, hey, we haven't really gone back to this place in a couple of months. I wonder what it's like now. And because I had built up that trust, I understand that's not the most exact pitch, but because I had built up that trust, my news managers were like, okay, go and do it, and we'll see what happens. And this is the story that came from that.
And Neil, I was just gonna ask, is everybody hearing audio? It sounds like I may have a mix of some people that are hearing and some people not. Neil, I don't know if you could cue that up again and just reshare with audio on there, because I was getting it kind of sporadic on my end.
Todas las cosas.
Volunteers like Andy Winter
Probablemente como 8.
are often the first faces migrants see after crossing the border. 2 migrant families from Mexico are here, and they both have young children. They're waiting for Border Patrol to come and apprehend them at this makeshift camp along the border wall. And Andy begins to make them a warm meal.
If it was me in their situation, I would hope someone would show up and make me soup. You know, there's sometimes families here who were traveling and hadn't had food or water for 40 hours or more. And the parents had been giving whatever food and water they had to the kids the whole time. And so they're in really rough shape, but the same thing, the first water you give them, the first thing you do is give it to their kids.
¿Por qué te fuiste a México?
Por miedo, o sea, no quiero regresar, tengo miedo por mis niñas, que mis hijas vayan a una escuela y yo no tenga ese miedo a que mi hija ya no regrese.
I hope I never have to flee for my life. And if I do, I hope there's people to greet me wherever I go.
Bienvenida a Nueva York, gracias.
All of that is in these simple little cups of soup.
Reporting in Sassabee, Adam Klepp, KGUN 9.
Okay, so Adam, break down your process there, because, again, you mentioned to your news managers, who I know well, to Lisa and to Martha, your assistant news director, maybe Danelle, your executive reporter. I kind of have a general concept of a story there, but they know you're going to come back with something. Just tell us how that unfolded.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things you mentioned earlier was with these increased reporter staffs, there's not as much pressure to have to turn something every day. So this is something where I'm driving 1.5 hours to this camp, and then I got there and only that volunteer Andy is there. There's no people yet. And so I sat there for another 50, 60 minutes waiting for migrants to show up. And I didn't have that feeling of stress that, oh, I need to turn something today. I can't sit here this long. I was able to kind of wait for that story to come to me. And so having, that trust and having that kind of flexibility was huge for this piece, because if I didn't have that, then this story never would have been told. In terms of some of the process, something that we're kind of coached on is to really listen to what people are telling you in the interview, and then trying to match that up later with visuals. So I have Andy saying things like, the first thing that a parent does when I make them this soup is give it to their kids. And so I heard that. And so when he gave that cup of soup to that migrant mother, I was able to film her doing exactly what he said she would do, and giving it to her kids. He says something like, hopefully if I flee for my life, there's someone to greet me wherever I show up. And I have video of a volunteer hugging one of the migrant women that were there. And then a last point is something that we're also really kind of coached up on through people like Chris, executive reporters, people that come and train us at in the different markets, is trying to kind of create more natural moments with the people that you're interviewing. In that story, I'm not pulling Andy aside from kind of the makeshift stove there. I'm interviewing him while he is making food for the people. when I go over and interview the migrant mother with her family, they're all sitting there on these crates eating the food. I didn't ask her to stand up and go somewhere else. I just sit with them and put myself on their level. And from that, you get better sound bites. You make your interview subject feel more comfortable. And it's not even an interview at that point. It's just a conversation. And so those were just little notes that I wanted to share from putting together that piece.
All right, Adam, fantastic job. Thank you so much. And I know there'll be questions for you at the end of this, so please hang out. Good stuff. Geneva Zoltek is going to be up next. Geneva, I first met in one of our Montana newsrooms. Then I was working in our Boise newsroom, and she was in Boise. And one day I'm in an editorial meeting in Las Vegas, and in walks Geneva. She truly has ascended from small to middle to large market over the last few years at Scripps, and I've been proud to see her grow as a reporter. There you see Geneva in front of the Las Vegas airport, for anybody who's familiar with that town. And Geneva, go ahead and set this story up and just tell us a little bit about your expertise, because you really do have a niche that you're compassionate about and that you focused on so far in your time in Las Vegas.
Yeah, so for this story, we had a series at our station called Path to the White House. And I'm not sure if every Scripps station did this, but basically Scripps News once a week for about 6 weeks or something like that had a panel of voters come together and discuss an issue. And we would air that panel, and then we would do a localized package to kind of supplement that coverage. So the panel that my package was supposed to match with was on climate change. And so what I did was I got in touch with a kind of a neutral party for this story, which was the Desert Research Institute. And they're really tapping into the issue of heat in Las Vegas, which is a very big issue. And so that was kind of my angle was, hey, I'm going to try and just add depth to this story of heat. And this is one that I spent a lot of time in the edit bay on. So with that, I'll let you press play.
Temperature is officially measured at Harry Reid Airport, and on the hottest day ever recorded, that temperature would hit 117 degrees, but not every part of the valley experiences that heat in the same way. For example, here in North Las Vegas, it's been deemed an urban heat island, a neighborhood that on average feels 11 degrees hotter. So why is that?
There are spaces, geographical areas within the metro area that are hotter.
To learn more about the valley's hot spots, I met up with Ariel Chenard, who leads what's called the Southern Nevada Heat Resilience Lab.
We're working with communities to identify how they're impacted by heat and where there might be some climate resilience solutions, adaptations, and interventions that we can take so it doesn't have such a huge impact on people's lives.
In this area near Petiti Park, I took an infrared thermometer. Look at that difference. Tracking the difference in heat from surface to surface.
48, yeah. So when you have a lot of hard, impermeable surfaces, not a lot of shade, maybe older homes that aren't as well insulated or energy efficient, all of those factors combine to create an environment where it's simply hotter all the time.
In these urban heat islands, the infrastructure heats up and then traps heat, preventing cool downs at night.
Temperatures year on year trend upwards, but what's particularly challenging is the nighttime lows are higher so that it doesn't cool down as much as it used to maybe in the past.
Ariel tells me an important factor of heat vulnerability is socioeconomics.
Heat in Las Vegas is a systemic issue. So when you talk about heat, you end up talking about housing affordability, energy costs, food costs. And yeah, it's hot here in Las Vegas, but people make really steep trade-offs to try and stay healthy and stay cool when it's very, very hot.
According to U.S. Census data, the median household income for this area of North Las Vegas is $28,000 annually. 19% of those households are without a vehicle and 71% are renters.
People sometimes have to choose between putting food on the table or keeping their house at a safe and comfortable temperature.
Over 2 million people call the Las Vegas Valley home, and in a city that attracts tens of millions of visitors annually, there are subtle and sometimes stark differences from one part of town to the next. For example, shady West Summerlin trends much cooler compared to sunny Henderson.
Although everybody is exposed to extreme heat here, the way you experience it very much depends on who you are and where you live, and what kind of resources you have to cope with that extreme heat.
Climate scientists expect temperatures to continue warming as emissions continue to trend upward globally, a worrying trend for the years to come.
Even though it's a dry heat, our temperatures are still very dangerous.
Reporting in North Las Vegas, I'm Geneva Zoltek. One of the hottest.
All right, Geneva, thank you. So just tell us a little bit about your process here, because I know we've had conversations about, climate reporting and making sure that our viewers fully understand the impact of the story you're trying to tell.
Yeah, well, with the process of that story, I think for me, it's always important to add context and add science into my stories and add research. So that's why I like to do a lot of add a lot of those hard figures into my stories so that I can drill it home like, hey, this isn't just a narrative, this isn't just a story, this is like something that we really are keeping track of as a community. And here are some of the stats behind it. Now, I will say, like, I wish I would have characterized that story, but it's one of those things, you're given an assignment in a newsroom and sometimes you just got to get what you get. And that is kind of what I ended up with. I stayed late that day because I knew it was airing the next morning. So I stayed late and like did a bunch of like graphics and editing in it. So that was kind of a unique scenario, but yeah, I think one thing I always like to show in my stories is the warming that's happening globally. And it isn't just a global issue, it's a community issue. It's like something that particular neighborhood, 20% of them don't have a car, they make $28,000 or less, that's the average income. Like those are pretty stark difficulties. So, and I think another thing about this story is it's a jumping off point, right? This is my story to go like, here's the data, here's the research, here's the issue. And then from there on, I can go out and talk to community members and always link back to this kind of baseline reporting. And I'm in my first year here in Las Vegas. So that's what I've kind of been doing is really setting the groundwork for future stories to always go back to the data, because in climate reporting, you have to face a lot of people who are not bought in. So I always try to go like, look, this is coming from research. This is coming from hard information. And this particular story ended up airing on the Scripps network, which is a really cool part of Scripps that I really enjoy. Like if you really have a story that shines and your managers are proud of, they can flag it for Scripps News. And a lot of times the producers will pull it and put it into their national news programming. So that's something that a lot of reporters can really be proud of in all of our markets. I've found is like, hey, that story went national.
And I want to add there. Oh, sorry, Geneva. I was just going to say about the Scripps News part of it. We are trying to better connect and bring down that silo between the network and the local stations. And we are seeing more of that over the last 6 months, really, where our stories, like Adam's border stories or your climate stories would have that opportunity to be seen by a larger audience.
Yeah. And I think what Adam is doing and what I'm trying to do, like they do have national relevance because these are two really big stories, that I think a lot of people throughout the country have thoughts and concerns about. So it's really cool to be, a local news reporter, but feel like this is an impactful story to a broader community. And I'll just kind of touch on some of the other stories I do, because that was a little bit of a unique one. But I also go out in the communities, like rural Nevada is really dealing with lithium mining right now, like the concerns of a lithium boom and solar expansion. So I get to do stories similar to Adam, where I'm like out there knocking doors, talking to people who are like really on the forefront of these larger issues. And I've always felt a lot of support from management to both like do those real people stories, but also network within the company. Like I'm always calling Chris or like other people, just, hey, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think about teaming up on this, or can you watch this story? So I think this is a really good company for that cross collaboration. I've even had some conversations with Amber Solens, chief meteorologist in Phoenix, a few times. She's mentored me because she's a really big climate change person in the industry. So I just have a lot of great things about my experience, and yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Geneva. And I'll tell you, one of our 2025, I don't want to say initiative, but we are really trying to work more on relationship building, because so often, like working at a TV station, you kind of feel like you're in your silo and you forget how big the company is. And we are working with more of that cross-station collaboration, not only with the network, but the locals. All right. So this tees us up for Mr. Bryant Madrick, who again mentioned that he first started with Scripps at KSHB in Kansas City. My wife used to be a producer at that Scripps station when we worked in the Kansas City market. And now he's worked his way up to the executive reporter role at WTKR in Norfolk, Virginia. So you're not going to see Bryant in this story, but he's going to talk more about his position and how he helps coach and elevate the journalism in his newsroom with his reporters.
Yes, that's right. You will not see me in this story, but I did play a role in helping to shape what this story looks like and who you hear in this story. At WTKR, we are one of the stations. We have a brand that is called We Follow Through. So, what we follow through means, I mean, every station, we always follow up on a story, but this is not just a simple, oh, there was a minor update to a story. When there's a big story or a big topic that we are covering, we want to stay on that story. When there are new elements that people need to know about, when people wonder, well, I wonder, they talked about this new casino that was coming to our city, but is anything happening with it? We're following through with stories, whatever the topic may be. Our whole brand here is to make sure that the viewers know in this market that we have not forgotten about those stories, while the other stations are chasing after the next one. In this story you're about to see, it tackles something that impacts everyone. It's the child care situation, really the cost of child care. It varies depending on what city you live in, but the bottom line is it's too much. And the city of Virginia Beach, which is the largest city in our DMA, it's about 500,000 people, I believe, which a lot of people sometimes are surprised by when they think Virginia Beach, Virginia, but there's a lot of people in that city, and it's the largest city in our DMA. Their city council tried to actually take up this issue in their meeting, understanding that there's a crisis. What are the solutions to this problem? Our reporter Angela Bohan originally covered that story, just basically just the nuts and bolts of the original meeting. But then leading up to another meeting, there was a follow-up. Now, the meeting was in the evening, so as a dayside reporter, what is the story that we're going to cover on this topic? For Angela, I explained a couple of things. We need to hear from a parent. This is one of those government stories, and one of the biggest problems with these kinds of stories is you hear from the official, and you hear all of the details, but you sometimes don't hear from the people. That is a trap I see in a lot of stories, and I'm guilty of it during my reporting career. It was important that we hear from a parent. And also, it's important that we remind the viewer that we are staying on this story. So we are explicit about it. You're going to hear it in the anchor intro. You're also going to hear it in the story. And then finally, creativity. We want to make sure that in the stand-ups that you take any options, any opportunity you can to really make the story unique and interesting. Angela Bohan is the reporter. She was an MMJ on this story. So she pitched the story, she shot it, she wrote it, she edited the story. So she was working by herself. So pay attention to that. Before we watch the story, I want to be clear, this is not a perfect story. And my intention was not to present to you a perfect story. This story was pitched in the morning meeting, and Angela had a few hours to put this together. I think it came out pretty well, but under that deadline pressure of finding that real mom and finding all of the creativity that we needed to find for this story, this is what came on television that night.
We begin tonight talking about childcare. Last night, we told you about a childcare center in Chesapeake announcing that it will close its doors tomorrow. It's reportedly being shut down after the state revoked its license. This has left some families scrambling for other options.
In Virginia Beach this week, the mayor called it a national crisis as the city council learned more about the urgent need for affordable, quality childcare.
Tonight, News 3 reporter Angela Bohan is following through, talking about what is being done at the state and local level to help families.
This time it's been really, really difficult.
Libby Bunker is certainly not alone in her search for childcare. Since my first report this week, I've heard from quite a few parents, some saying they can find childcare but would have to work at least 2 jobs to afford it. Earlier this week, a group called -9 to 5 presented data that shows the average childcare cost for an infant in Virginia Beach is more than $18,000 a year. But what can state and local leaders do about it? Well, last week, Governor Glenn Youngkin signed 10 bills supporting his Building Blocks for Virginia Families initiative. It's designed to help expand childcare options. Virginia Beach Council member Chris Taylor, who has young children, tells me he is open to exploring more funding for city programs and incentives for private daycares.
We have one of the most robust Parks and Recs departments in the country, Gold Award winner. And so I think we have to continue to encourage them to do the job they're doing, continue to support them through the budget, and then also look at how we can reach small individual business owners that reach out and say, we need help.
VB Parks and Rec says it has openings for ages 3 to 5 and that it's more affordable than many other options.
If we get our current batch of hirees on board, we should have around 50 to 53 spots available starting in September.
But for Bunker, finding care for her youngest has proven to be very tough.
There's just not a lot of creative options where it's blended, I'll put you down, work and childcare options.
And council member Taylor says he thinks organizing a forum, bringing together VB schools, Parks and Rec, and private daycare owners could help give city leaders a better understanding of the issues at hand here. Of course, it's a complex issue, so we have some resources listed at WTKR.com for both parents looking for care and also those looking to go into this field. In Virginia Beach, Angela Bohan, News 3.
And so, Brian, one thing that I think you could maybe hit on here briefly is just talking about how you help pull vision out of reporters in your role as the executive reporter. Because when we're under, that deadline pressure, I know that Adam and Geneva talked about the time flexibility, but the reality is we still do day turns. And so when that happens, a lot of times it really is hit the ground running and get everything going, and you might overlook some elements. Just talk about how you help steer the reporters in your newsroom.
The main thing for me is understanding who is impacted by this story. And once you can identify who is impacted by this story, then that is who you need to focus on. And in a perfect world, you may not always find that person, but whoever you end up talking to, you can still personalize that impact. Last night, for example, there was a story that we've been following for several days. A teen who was shot and killed near a bus stop. It happened early in the morning. There's still a lot of details we don't know, but our reporter attempted to try to get some of those answers. He struck out on finding the so-called real people, right? No one who knew this child, we can't get in touch with those people. So he ended up talking to a community activist. Now, that could have been an expert, right? And technically he kind of was, but he was someone who, just like the family of this teen, he knows what pain feels like because he lost someone himself. So I explained to that reporter, okay, so that is your real person. That is the vision for this story. Build this story around that individual and ask personal questions that will pull out some emotion in that story so you have something to build off of. So the vision has to be focused on the people and understanding that you can pull out the emotion out of anyone. Our news director, he's new here to our station, and he has hit on that personalization out of everyone. We're all real people. We're all human beings, regardless of your title, whether you're just a guy on the street or whether you're the CEO of a company. So the questions that you ask really determine the kind of answers you get. But that vision starts with identifying who are the people who are most impacted by this story and then going from there.
All right, Bryant, that's awesome. And, I know there's probably some questions that some of you might have for Bryant. How do you get on that path to be an executive reporter? Again, it's a newly created role within Scripps that we have been hiring for just over a year. And we have nearly 30 people in those positions. And if you do have questions about that or any other questions for those on our panel, please, this is a good reminder to put those in the Q&A. And once we wrap here with Austin, we'll answer as many of those questions that you might have about Scripps or what we're doing as we can. But with that, I want to turn it over, last but not least, Austin Pollock, who's now at one of our flagship stations, News Channel 5 in Nashville, after cutting his teeth at our Lexington Kentucky station and really has found a niche in more of that positive storytelling.
Yeah, my journey was kind of unexpected. I remember when I interviewed in Lexington and they kind of asked, what do you want? And I really wanted to tell positive stories. I wanted to at least work for a company and work for a station that also believed in it. But when I got there, it was really just one of those scenarios of working your way up. I started as a general assignment weekend MMJ, and the stories that I pitched specifically geared toward what I wanted to do. And if it was a case where, hey, we don't have the time for that, or we don't have the staffing for it, then of course, that's GA, I understand that. But I always say they gave me the key and let me drive the car. That's one of the best ways to put it. It's building trust with your managers and your leaders in your newsroom, where they say that person, maybe it was a lighthearted story, but they did something that made it different, that made it stand out. And that's how I ended up in Nashville. And I remember way before the Nashville conversation even came up, and someone's, write your job title, write your ideal job description. And I said, man, I would really love to have a situation and a job where I could tell these types of stories and have the time to make them quality stories, to, make the viewer smile, make the viewer feel something. But one of the things I really wanted was I wanted to learn. I wanted to continue taking my career to that next step, and coming to Nashville was everything that I really wanted. And this story that I want to show is really a prime example of what I've learned in Nashville. And I think sometimes as an MMJ, you get stuck on these rules, no jump cuts, don't jump the 180, all these different types of rules. But one of the things, and I'll get into this a little bit after we hear the story, that I've learned from our executive reporter, Jason Lamb, is it's about the moments. Sometimes, you don't even realize that there was a jump cut. Maybe you don't even realize that you crossed the 180, but it's like the moments, and maybe you don't really care about the lighting. Maybe you don't care that the shot was a little bit shaky, because you got the moment. And I want to show this story so you guys can see a little bit more of what I'm talking about.
How we doing today?
It's a great day to stock up.
Anything else I can get for you?
Yeah, maybe a couple of those. And, how about a pound of wings?
Yeah, I'll get that for you right now.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Miss Abigail will take care of you right up front.
Would you like a bag with this? That's a lot of chicken.
I'm always going to ask for you. What's your name?
Abigail. There is lots of meat here, and we're at Light Hill Meats, my dad's business.
See, when I went to work with my parents, I did my homework in a conference room. Boring. Abigail here gets an experience.
$221.33.
Money can't buy.
What do you like about coming in here? What's your favorite part?
Buying the stuff and eating it.
You like eating everything here?
Yes.
What's your favorite?
Ice cream.
Oh, you like the ice cream?
And you'd guess she's how old? Maybe like 8 or 9?
I'm only a kid for 6 years.
But Abigail is wise.
I love eating.
Me too. Beyond her 6 years.
Before you leave, maybe you can check around and buy something.
And speaking of money...
38. Thank you. It makes kids smart, and it is complicated, very complicated.
It was so busy, but Dad was there to answer the call when something just wouldn't ring up.
S-A-L? Daddy teaching me.
Your dad's teaching you? What's he teaching you?
I can the cash register, and I can only do card. Would you like your receipt?
Please. Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. You do as well.
But there was something else Abigail said that just stuck.
Because I help and make somebody happy.
It's the little things that can make a big difference.
Have a great day.
And a great day. I'm Austin Pollock, News Channel 5.
All right, Austin, thank you so much. And I'll have you talk a little bit about your process. And just a reminder for anybody who's still with us, I see quite a few people still participating. If you have questions about Scripps, opportunities, I promise there are no dumb questions. Please feel free to put those in, and we'll be answering those in just a couple of minutes. But Austin, you are always proof that you find characters of all different backgrounds and ages in this case.
You know, there's a number of things that I really want to touch on with this story. This is a story that I found, it's the importance of staying in touch with people who pitch you stories months ago. So Abigail's mother pitched me a story back in May, and it was about a baseball league for children with disabilities. And I covered that story. You know, she followed me on Instagram. I followed her back, Facebook, things like that. And she just happened to post this video like, oh, look who's helping out at the shop today. And it made me say, wait, that's actually a really, really cool story. So that's how that came to be. That wasn't a pitch. That was me just, you build this connection, you see these people, you continue to follow them. And it's like, oh, wait, that's a great story. And again, working with Jason Lamb, our executive reporter, we talk about how sound bites and nat sound, you can't just sprinkle it in out of nowhere for the sake of sprinkling it in. It has to back up what you're trying to point to prove. And, you know, there's all these techniques. I think sometimes we start with a story of, you might start this story with Abigail Neal is busy after school. Well, you want to build a reveal in this story. You think, okay, this is a butcher shop. What's the story here? And then you have that soundbite where he says, Miss Abigail will take care of you up front, or Miss Abigail will ring you up. And at that point, you're kind of like, ooh, well, who's this Abigail? And then you see, bam, she's 6 years old. And you hear that voice, you see that face, you see how welcoming she is. That's building a character. That's what Scripps is about. And what my job is, it's building and finding characters. I don't always do those anymore. This is something I've really worked on the last few months, is I don't always do those. All right, turn the camera on, hit record, give me your first and last name and spell both. Those rule of third interviews where, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm looking that way. I still do those, and those are really, really important. And it's important for your listener to hear your question. That's why you heard my question. It's all about transparency. But one of the things that I try and do is ask those questions as someone's doing something. And there's a couple of reasons for that. If you put them in that rule of thirds and there's a camera and a light on them, that makes you a little more nervous. And you want to get people, when they're answering these questions, in as natural a state of mind as you possibly can. That's where the best sound bites come from. I mean, she looks at me and she says, maybe you could look around and buy something. And I looked just at the other panelists, and I saw those smiles. And I'm sure there were people watching here who smiled at something like that. It's those natural, authentic moments. And I can't talk about this executive reporter role enough, because Jason's outstanding. It's taken, you know, I think I started working with him maybe in June or July, and that's when I've seen my work really start to take off and come together. I hear a lot of times from younger reporters or MMJs, they say, I'm just not getting the feedback. Well, how are you supposed to grow if you don't get the feedback? Sometimes you're seeking out this feedback from someone who you've never met. You're sending a message on LinkedIn, you're sending a message on Facebook or email, whatever it is, and you don't really know where to turn when you're trying to get this type of feedback. That's what's so great about Scripps, is these executive reporters are in your newsroom. Their job is to be there to give you that feedback. When I send Scripps in for approval, it's no longer looks good or you're good. And I got really tired of that throughout my career, because I said, I'm not getting better. I'm not getting better. But when I started working with Jason, I mean, I said, please send as much red as you possibly can. I said, tell me this is not good. And he would send back the red, and he would also sit with me and explain why something should be written the way that it is. Or he talked to me about, don't worry about, maybe that shaky shot at the end. Don't worry that it's shaky. Give me a little more of it, because it's about the moment. And if I'm listening and watching that moment, I'm not paying attention to the wiggle or the shakiness. That's where, like someone judging like an MPPA thing may say, but your viewer is not going to say, he jumped the 180, he jumped the 180. Your viewer doesn't know what that is. Your viewer doesn't know what a jump cut is. Your viewer wants to feel something. And that's what's so important about this piece, is I see the smiles and I see how it made people feel. And there were a bunch of these journalistic or photography rules that I broke throughout, because it's about finding those moments. And it's also about staying in touch with people. And you used to hear about business cards, which are great. I don't know the last time I got a business card, but follow these people, continue staying on top of their story. You never know when there's a follow-up.
Yeah, and also that's a great point, because we also talk about the follow through. I mean, that's what Bryant's station is. You guys are a positivity focused station, but it doesn't mean that we aren't following up on stories. Really, all of these components, these differentiators that we talked about on this webinar are married together, and were originally supposed to be one, but we've asked stations to pick one that they really want to highlight and build around. Thank you so much, Austin. This is great stuff. And just for clarity, when Austin is talking about Jason, he's referring to Jason Lamb, who is our executive reporter at News Channel 5 in Nashville. Jason was a longtime reporter at the station who earlier this year and late last year, I deployed out into the field to do training in some of our small markets. And Jason, within a year, going from that deployed mission out in the field at our stations, has now worked into that executive reporter role in Nashville, the same role that Bryant holds in Norfolk. So with that, I want to leave this open to questions. And there have been a few that have been placed here in this form, and I'll just go through a couple of these. One that was, I was able to do local reporting in our community and loved it, from the sheriff's office, outdoor press conferences to ribbon cuttings throughout the community. I moved to Florida and it's all new. Do you offer mentoring in these positions? Yes, the answer is yes, we do. But I want to make sure I hope I answer this correctly. We have a number of stations across the state of Florida, from Tallahassee to Tampa to Fort Myers, Naples to West Palm Beach. So we have a lot of opportunity there. And yes, we have openings at our Florida stations. Everything from MMJs to senior reporters. We have a variety of roles that are open in those markets. And just like I go into any of the stations that you see pictured here, I do the same thing in the state of Florida. I have a team member, Bridget Paholka, who is a photographer, photojournalist / editor by trade, based at our station, Woo's TV in Cleveland, that assists me with that. But as I mentioned, we also tap internal talent within the company to help do that cross-training and mentoring. So yes, we absolutely do. Another question here: as a print journalist who has transitioned to digital and is looking to keep pushing into broadcast, what kind of training could be expected to help transition our storytelling talents from print to screen? Please hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. We have a program here at Scripps, the Journalism Journey Initiative, JJI, as we call it, where we are doing just that. We are going out and finding some of the best print talent in the business and bringing them into the broadcast world. And we've done extensive training with those folks, because we know that is outside the comfort zone. They're really good reporters, but the technical skills, that's the hard part to learn. And so we make sure that we immerse them in that and get them comfortable. And we have a number of success stories. I could go through many, many of them. Neil is on this call nodding his head. He's been a big part of that program as well. And we continue to look for print journalists that have been embedded in their communities for a long time to make that transition. Here's one that, Bryant, you might want to handle quickly. As an executive reporter, how often do you have the opportunity to pitch and report on your own stories? And I can add to this and what I see across the board, but Bryant, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I can pitch every day. I mean, everyone in our newsroom is expected and encouraged to pitch stories. So, executive reporter, you think that you hear that reporter part. I do not report in the field anymore. I'm on the management team. So primarily, a lot of the times when I go out in the field, I'm with a reporter primarily to provide guidance on the execution of the story. But I myself do not turn stories anymore in this new role. However, if there is a big situation that happens, we're a coastal city in Norfolk, Virginia. a hurricane, God forbid, knock on wood, a hurricane comes our way and we need people to get out there and tell the story, I certainly can and still can tell that story as a reporter. So that may be the rare exception when you may see me back on television, but in my current role, I am no longer on television.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize there that the executive reporter is a frontline management position, and it is a 99.9999% off-air role, and that's the way it's designed, because we feel like if they're working on their story, they're not helping to elevate the journalism with all of our reporters, and we think that it's really important that they do that. Just as Brian mentioned, there are some exceptions. In Tallahassee, Channing Frampton was our primary Monday through Friday evening anchor at one point. They had a hurricane that hit the Big Bend of Florida, and with his anchor experience, Channing did, help us lead 17, I think it was 17 hours of continuing coverage on the air that day. So when the big story hit, Channing was able to utilize his skill set to help better provide information to the viewers of North Florida, South Georgia. But for the most part, the job is off air. One person said, I've been waiting for answers on my director application that I applied for at WXMI in Grand Rapids. My question, how soon will I hear back from anyone on the status? What are the next steps? How does Scripps go about their business hiring future employees looking for a career in the broadcast TV industry? Although I cannot specifically answer that question because I'm not sure the status of it, I'll be honest, I don't get involved in every hiring decision in the company. Emmy, you're on this call. Emmy is one of our senior talent acquisition directors. Emmy, can you provide any context there for folks that might be wondering that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, my name is Emmy Owens, and I have the pleasure of leading our recruiting organization. So when we wrap up today, I'll give you some information on how to connect with our talent acquisition team directly to schedule time, as well as where you can apply for openings. But it does depend. When you apply to a position, it comes immediately to a member of our talent acquisition team. We'll review your information, your qualifications against the role, and then reach out beyond that. But I will put a pin so you can finish up Q&A, and then I'll touch on our active openings when you get to me.
All right, so let me get to this question here. Somebody says, thanks for hosting. I'm an early career journalist based in New York City. What advice do you have for new journalists who want to find and develop their own voice when telling stories? How can they make their writing, storytelling stand out and be more engaging? Are there any opportunities available right now for recent grads, early career journalists? The answer to that question is yes, there absolutely are opportunities available. And I'm going to turn it over to my panel because all of you guys have differentiated your voices in this space. I know we're coming up on time. So real quickly, and I'll start with Austin, then Bryant, then Adam and Geneva, just because you guys are left to right on my screen. What advice would you give to our early career journalist in New York City on that front?
I think the biggest thing is just it is hard. I think I remember back to when I started my career in West Virginia, but I think as I kind of transitioned and maybe put my shoes back where I was when I was starting out, I think it's just continuing to make your strides and just get your reps in. That's the best thing you could do, is just get comfortable with everything that you're doing. And a lot of these things take time. I think when you are seeking out advice, whether you do a story or when you have those stories that air, whether it's online or whether it's on TV, and you want feedback, don't only send the actual package, send the script as well, because that allows whoever's looking at it to go in and really make changes. One of the best things that Jason Lamb, again, our executive reporter, does is he'll send me the changes he makes, and I can look back and I can see exactly what he's talking about when he says, oh, what if we use this word because you mention it down here, and whatnot. I think that's incredibly helpful. And when you talk about more engaging, write like you talk. It drives me crazy whenever, and I don't do this anymore, but when I used to hear someone say, yeah, he was lost in the mail was lost in a wooded area. I've never said wooded area before. There's all those words that are kind of like, hey, say what you would say as if I'm talking to the person who's just sitting right next to me at the dinner table. Try to eliminate some of that legal talk or doctor talk and just speak like a regular person. And if you go back and you were to see that story about that 6-year-old in the butcher shop, you want to also not just report, but you want to tell a story. That's why you heard me say, oh, how about the wings? Oh, those look good. Those look good. Speak to your video. Speak to what's on the screen and be more casual. It doesn't always have to be this, stuck up shirt tie type of thing. Speak casually.
All right, so conversational tone. And Brian, I'll go to you, and we'll have to move through this pretty quickly because we're at time, and I want to make sure we have time to put this QR code, and Emmy's going to talk about how you can apply. But any quick advice to our young journalists?
Amen to everything Austin said. All I would add to that is don't lose your empathy. This is a tough job. You're going to deal with people in tough situations. It's important to understand that that person could be you. How would you like to be treated? Don't forget that if you stay connected to that empathy, it will definitely help your storytelling and also help the connection that you build with the people that you interview and come across.
That's awesome. Thank you, Bryant. Adam.
Yeah, I'd just say don't be afraid to let your own interests kind of come into it. Obviously, we can't share opinions or anything like that, but my personal goal is to be a foreign correspondent. That's why I'm really interested in some of this border immigration stuff, because I can kind of get that type of experience in, my local markets. Geneva's interested in doing, climate stories. So she's kind of going after her own passions, and that really comes through in the reporting. The other thing, just quickly, I'd say about being, starting off as a journalist, specifically within Scripps, there's a lot of opportunity to move up within this company. There's big markets and small markets, and also a lot of those small markets are in the same state as the big market. And that's kind of how I was able to go from Tucson to Phoenix. And I had a 2-year contract in Tucson, but I was able to leave that contract after just a year to come to Phoenix because Phoenix had seen some of my reporting from Tucson and was interested in having me here. Grand Rapids to Detroit, Tallahassee to Tampa. I think Colorado Springs right to Denver. So if you're, considering jumping into a company, if you're still in school and trying to figure out what where you want to go next, I would just say within Scripps, there's a lot of opportunities to move up and move up quickly if you're ready for it.
Thank you, Adam. And we've seen you do that. Geneva.
Yeah, I would say as far as finding your voice, my advice is take the reins. You're in control, go out there. What are you curious about? Who are the voices we're not hearing from in the community? And I think that's what really drives me is like getting on top of something that, that needs to just be getting on. It's such a weird way to put it, but it just needs coverage, right? So follow that drive. Like what even got you interested in journalism? Be that when you're out in the community. And the second thing I would say is confidence is a skill. Like you don't have to start out in this work industry confident and going out there. Like just practice it every day. Practice being brave and being outspoken, and it'll eventually just become who you are, and you won't even have to feel like you won't even have to doubt who you can be on camera and who you can be out in your community.
All right, Geneva, thank you. And I'll just end with this. Be curious, right? Curiosity is a hard thing to teach, and I talk to reporters about it all the time. If you see something interesting, someone else might think it's interesting. Explore your market. Wherever you land, make sure you get to understand it. Go to corners of the market where you don't regularly spend time and get to know people. And I think it was Austin that mentioned business cards. Hand them out like candy. We've got a chief investigative reporter in Denver. Tony Kovaleski talks about this all the time. They are cheap to print. We'll give you as many as you want. Hand them out to waiters, waitresses, the person cutting your hair at the gas station, because most people don't interact with television reporters on a daily basis. Remember that. So you're automatically interesting when you meet people, and they will remember you. So just have that curiosity, go out there, understand your market, and you will absolutely grow. So Emmy, I'm going to turn it over to you. Because this is important for anybody that's looking. And again, I just want to say, I know that, Austin, Bryant, Geneva, and Adam are all on LinkedIn. They're on social media. You can find any of us that way. If you have any lingering questions or follow-ups, please feel free. We're happy to respond. But Emmy, I'll turn it over to you.
Chris, I want to
Thanks.
add one more thing. Sorry, real quick. What this you mentioned this as far as the business cards, and it just came in my head as something that I did in Lexington a few years ago that was incredibly helpful. When you have those business cards, if you go into coffee shops, like locally owned coffee shops, a lot of them will have bulletin boards. Stick them on that bulletin board, because when someone's standing there waiting, like for their, $17 latte, and they're just looking at this, at this bulletin board, and they see your card, they may take it because they may have a story. You just never know. Put them anywhere. Just do it.
Right. And on the flip side, as a reporter, always look at those bulletin boards, because we have found stories that way as well. All right, Emmy, go ahead and tell people how they can find opportunities at our 61 stations across 41 cities.
Will do. Thank you, Chris. And again, I just want to thank Chris and our panel, Geneva, Adam, Brian, and Austin. I'm confident that everyone is walking away with a better understanding of Scripps' focus on storytelling to connect with our communities and how we support our storytellers through coaching and development. But as Chris mentioned, I'd like to turn our focus to all of you as our audience and how you can learn more about opportunities to grow your career with Scripps. We currently have over 200 openings across the company. That includes news and sales, engineering, marketing, and more. We're hiring MMJs and reporters in Lafayette, Louisiana. You can join Austin and Nashville, Detroit, and Salt Lake. You heard Chris touch on the role of senior reporter a bit earlier. We're actively hiring senior reporters in Lansing, Michigan, Fort Myers and West Palm Beach, Florida, Corpus Christi, Texas. We're hiring producers in Omaha and Colorado Springs, Kansas City, and my hometown of Cincinnati. And last but not least, if you're like Geneva and your passion is telling weather stories, we're hiring meteorologists in Lansing and Grand Rapids, Michigan, as well as Phoenix and Baltimore and Tampa. So that's just a snapshot of a few of our openings across the company. So you see a QR code on the screen. If you're interested in any of our news openings specifically, I invite you to scan that QR code. That'll allow you to schedule a meeting with one of our recruiters to discuss your specific interests and opportunities that match. You can also visit the career site that you see to view and apply for any openings at any time. And similar to the rest of the panel, you can find me on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect and reach out, and we'd love to find the right opportunity for you at Scripps.
All right, Emmy, and to our panel, thanks again. I appreciate everyone's time today. We know it's valuable. We know the deadlines happen at the same time every day. So we do appreciate you spending the hour with us, and we hope you did learn something. And again, we're here if you have any follow-ups. Thank you so much.